Hey guys, it's your boy M.K.S here as well. I don't often give an update of the time when I upload the video, but it's 1:15 here in the morning. I messed up today, I think, or technically yesterday, because not sure why I quoted that, but anyway, because I went to sleep around 8 or 9 o'clock p.m. and fell asleep on settee because I was a bit rough, as we say here in the UK. I don't know if you use the same term wherever you are from, but I was a bit tired basically and felt my eyes were a bit sore. I didn't sleep well last night. So anyway, I was trying to use like a little shawl instead of a duvet. So anyway, sorry, I'm waffling on this. I apologize. So yeah, so I'm going to sleep late again, and I didn't really do any writing or planning as well as I'd like to do. But made a few videos. But I'd love to do a bit I'd love to write for at least an hour a day, as much as possible. But I did have a nice walk. The weather was quite good, so there were some things that went right. But anyhow, I wanted to talk about some of the controversial issue, and I tried to put in the title. I hope that no one takes offense to this video, but I want to talk about some of these stereotypes I have of Asians, in spite of being part Asian myself, and sometimes stereotypes are true, I suppose, and sometimes they're not. But anyway, I thought I'd confess or own up to such. And in the past, I talked about for some reason I was very keen on, as I used to call it, Oriental, but that's a non-PC term. So I now mention it as Far Eastern, and I call countries like India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh brown countries. And these quirky little terms. But as I say, with my works, or whether that's writing or making YouTube videos or whatever, if you can call them works, I never really mean to cause offense, but I do have these quirky ways of thinking about things. So anyway, I was writing up this thing about my plan to make Oriental unity, or as I would call it back then. And if we're not being PC, I'll probably use that term, but not, as I say, not to offend people. And one of the things I said was, people normally think that people from, let's call it the Far East, instead of the Orient, because apparently that's a colonial term, which is supposed to be quite offensive for a lot of people. But I'm sure if you went to a lot of parts of the Far East, they probably wouldn't really take it that offensive. But anyway, to avoid offense, I'll call it the Far East. I said that people normally think they look the same, or when people discriminate against Chinese, they probably don't differentiate between them and the Japanese and Koreans and Taiwanese or whatever. And my mum saw the article, or whatever you want to call it, the piece of work I was doing. She was saying, you'll get in trouble because people will think that you're being offensive, or that you're people will be offended. And of course, I suppose now people can get offended by very little things. So I hope I don't offend people. But as I say, with anything I talk about, I hope to be as honest as possible. But anyway, I'm going to try and get on with the. This is kind of like a list, but not my usual lists. But as I say, I know there are quite a few videos about Asian stereotypes and things like that, what people think of them. But I thought I'd do my own. As I wish to talk about Asia, and I talked about my alliterations because it's Saturday, so I'm not really getting to the point. I do apologise, but yeah. So I'll say number one is that, and I'm probably not going to come up with a list of 30 ideas, or thoughts. But number one is that people like from the Far East, or what I call brown countries, people who are Asian look very similar. Like people from China or Japan, unless you really knew, you probably couldn't really tell the difference between people from China or Japan or Korea or Taiwan or Thailand or whatever other Far Eastern countries. And I suppose it's similar for what I call brown countries like India, Pakistani, Sri Lankan and Bangladeshi. Though they don't always get along, they do have a similar appearance, I think. If you disagree, then that's fine. I'd love to hear any comments in the comment section either way. But that's one of the things I think. Second stereotype I have, I suppose, not necessarily in order, but is that generally speaking, Asians are quite good at studying, or good academically. Like, I'm not really that good academically, and I have learning disabilities, so I'm only part Asian, and I've never really when I was really younger, I wanted to be like a child prodigy, but unfortunately, I was like really poor academically. Like I was kept back a year and all that. It's quite embarrassing. I can't believe I admitted to that. But so I imagine like in a lot of Asian families, if you don't have, if you get anything other than A, you probably get disowned or at least told off or things like that. So, and I think strangely, I think that's similar with a lot of migrant families, especially even including ones from Africa and places like that. And maybe many families are the same. They see that what they call as education, well, I would call it so-called education or that sort of thing, but they see that as a way out of poverty or a way to do well in life. And so I think many parents can be strict, obviously from different backgrounds, but I think they say, Asians are quite good at maths, science, and that sort of thing, STEM subjects and things like that. If you've not heard of STEM, please Google it. And you can see some videos on YouTube about STEM and all that stuff. But yeah, that's so one, I think people from the Far East and also they look very similar, and people from brown countries look similar to each other as well, in my opinion. And secondly, as I say, they're good at studying academically and all that sort of thing. I think a third thing would probably be, generally speaking, certain sports that Asians are not said to be very good athletically, like in sports like football or soccer, if you prefer, depending on where you live in the world. I think that stereotype, like many stereotypes, is not always true, and I think you'll find exceptions. And I think sometimes it's opportunity, or like Asian nations were trying to develop their nations. So but I think now the Chinese and Indians are getting into football, and many other Asian nations as well. You'll probably find a lot of good players will come through. And a lot of people say here in the UK where I live, there's a lot of good footballers who are Asian, but they're not given opportunities because I think clubs are afraid of some of the racism they might experience, which black people used to go through a lot, and they still sometimes do, but not quite in the same way, apparently. So there are a lot of Asian players who are really good, who are professional level. I've heard about, but they're not given always the opportunities. There's only one player who made it professional that I've heard of who's Asian so far, or Indian, Anglo-Indian like myself, who's Michael Chopra. His name is. Some people say he wasn't that great, but I'm a bit biased because he's Anglo-Indian like myself. But he's one of the few people of Asian descent, or at least partial Asian descent, who made it pro in football, or soccer, as I say, or whatever you prefer to call it. But I think in the future there will be more. There are a few good, like from the Far East, like Korea and places like that, or Japan, that have made it professional. And apparently a long time ago there was a player who played for Celtic, a team I love, which I talked before about in my previous videos, where I love Celtic, but they had the first and probably the only Indian player so far who's made it pro, called Mohamed Salah, but no, not Mohamed Salah, sorry, Mohamed Salim, a big one, but I assume he's of Muslim background, but obviously, back then he didn't play. I don't know if it was because he couldn't afford it, but a lot of people from India never wanted to play barefoot, and they qualified for the World Cup apparently once, but they couldn't. FIFA said you have to play. FIFA, the governing body for football, said you have to have football boots to play, and they said maybe they couldn't afford it back then, but or for whatever cultural reasons or whatever, they didn't want to. I assume it's the former, but so yeah, I think there's some sports that Asians are said to excel in, like in things like badminton or table tennis. Again, that's only probably part of Asian nations, but in other sports like athletics, they're not said to be so great. So another thing is like what I've heard recently is that there's a stereotype about people from the Philippines, I think it is, where they're called Pinoys and all that, but where they're really good at singing. So again, like stereotypes aren't always accurate, but a lot of people say they're good at singing. And I think off the top of my head, I can't really think of many others. So yeah, like from a stereotype is that they're good at certain sports, but not other sports, like athletics. Or yeah, another one someone said is like Asians oftentimes don't go to the gym, and that sort of thing. Here in the UK, and I suppose one stereotype of people from the Far East is they do martial arts. I suppose that's quite a big stereotype if talking generically. But here in the UK, normally when people refer to Asians, they normally mean people from India, Pakistan, or places like that. And in America, I suppose it's like Chinese, generally speaking. Anywho, I think that's all I can think of off the top of my head. I might put in the comments any others I can think of, and I'd love to know what stereotypes you have, if you're honest, or what stereotypes you think need redefining or need challenging, or what people think of those stereotypes that I or other people have. And if you like, you can write any. If you make this far, you can always write any stereotypes you think of mixed race people. Like if you think we're like confused or whatever. So, anywho, peace and love.